Hello, my little Luxxes. This is another episode of Luxxy Charms, and I am your host, cosplayer Charsie Luxxx. Although today I'm not in cosplay due to the fact that I am doing a review on this episode. And as always, before any movie review, this is a quick spoiler alert. If you have not seen this film, the one that I'm about to talk about is Dreamcatcher 2021, and if you have not seen this, please be forewarned. Spoiler alerts. I also want to give a disclaimer here that there is sensitive topics that are a part of this review, and so on top of the spoiler alert, I'm also giving a trigger warning alert as well, because things like suicide and death and murder and all that is talked about in this, and we know how sensitive that it can be when people have gone through rehab and trauma and self-harm and suicide, so please be forewarned. So trying something a little different. It might seem like I'm off center right now due to the fact that I have a lot of space over here in this area, but I kind of want to bring up some movie clips and videos. The movie that I decided to do a review on is, of course, in the horror genre, and this is the movie that is called Dreamcatcher, but not to be confused with Stephen King's Dreamcatcher. This Dreamcatcher, its release date was on March 5th of 2021, and this film is completely not related to Stephen King's novel for Dreamcatcher, or that film that would have been based off of his original book. So we're not even going to compare those two in any way or form, because let's face it, you can't compare anything to Stephen King's films anyways, because he's kind of on a pedestal of his own when it comes to the horror genre. Wanted to start off, so I have my notes all ready to go, because I cannot just on a whim remember people's names, especially since the actors and actresses that were in this film weren't as well known to me. I think I recognize maybe one of the actors that was in the film. I've seen him in something else, but other than that, they were all brand new to me for this film, and I apologize if I butcher anybody's names or if I mispronounce them. We have our main characters, which are Pierce, who was acted by Kiki Koss, Jake, Zachary Gordon, Dylan, DJ Dreamcatcher, who was acted by Travis Burns, Hunter, Blaine Kern III, Ray, Olivia, I want to say it's Sue or Sue, just depends how she pronounces it. Brecken, played by Emerence Cooper. Ivy by Elizabeth Posey. Josephine by Adrienne Wilkinson. Colton by Lou Ferrigno Jr. And this was directed and written by Jacob Johnston, and I believe this was supposed to be also his debut film. He's done a lot of filmography and helped with other films and writing, but this one I think was actually supposed to be his debut film, of him being the director and writer, the main director and writer. And to kind of go over a quick synopsis of the film, it is based around two sisters who are estranged and that they haven't had a good relationship in the past 3 years, and that the sister Ivy comes to join up with her sister Pierce and Pierce's friend Jake, who are hanging out, and it's the week before their birthday. Well, as a early birthday surprise, Ivy buys tickets to an underground music festival that is called Cataclysm for all of them to go and enjoy the night, which of course they have to talk their friend Jake into going for this fun festival because he's got no interest in it. So Ivy, Pierce, and their two friends, Brecken and Jake, go along for the night of Cataclysm, which ends up being a complete rave setting. And as the night goes on, Pierce ends up meeting a mysterious man turns out to be DJ Dreamcatcher. He tells her his real name, which is Dylan. And as the evening goes on, he invites her up to his room for a private get-together before his music set starts. However, he gives her a drug, which is kind of a spin-off on peyote, which is very dangerous, you should never do. And she has a very bad drug trip. And unfortunately, because of her bad drug trip, she ends up committing suicide. She even kills herself in front of all of her friends and her sister. And to their horror, they are all blackmailed by Dylan's assistant, Josephine, who tells them that she's going to pin the murder on them if they don't keep it silent. And of course, Pierce's ex-sleeping buddy, not ex-boyfriend, her ex-sleeping buddy, talks them into, hey, we want to be paid off if you want us to keep this a secret. So they were told to return back for Dylan's or DJ Dreamcatcher's release party later that evening in order to get their blackmail payoff money. But as the evening continues for the next 48 hours, it is a living horror as one by one each one is killed by a strange assailant who you would swear is DJ Dreamcatcher. But somehow all of these murders are taking place while DJ Dreamcatcher is actually busy on his set, where he is clearly in front of hundreds and hundreds of people who clearly this crowd can see that he is there. So who is doing these mysterious murders? Is it his assistant, Josephine, who's trying to keep the secret? Or is it one of the friends who's actually disgruntled and has something holding it against the fact that Pierce ended up killing herself and wants to pin the murder on DJ Dreamcatcher? It keeps you guessing until the bloody surprise and the reveal of who is the true killer of this film. I kind of wanted to talk about this film because this is not one that is talked about at all. It's not a very high grossing film and it's very unpopular. It is actually very disliked. And I came across this one because it was on Hulu, so I put it on. I was intrigued by the movie poster for it, kind of looked a little into it, and of course you can read the little description when you're on Hulu, and ended up watching this film. And of course, seeing the really low ratings, I had low expectations of it, but I was just going to view it as if it was a slasher film, which is exactly how this film actually portrays itself. So I find it very interesting how disliked this movie it was, and I'll get more and more in depth with it, and of course give you my views of it, and even tell you what I thought of the film by the fact if I liked it, disliked it, hated it, loved it, whatnot. You know, the typical for a movie review. This film was rated as horror, mystery, and a thriller, but I feel like it should also have the tagline that it's drama as well. And of course, me talking about this, you'll understand why I think that you should, when you think of this film, think of it like a horror drama type of idea. Now, I also like to categorize this one as a slasher film due to the fact, of course, it's got your typical slasher. You have someone in a mask, they're a mystery, and they're killing people off one by one, and that they're gruesome, brutal deaths, although there are a lot of opinions, especially in the review section online that I've been seeing, that people were saying that it really wasn't that bloody, it really wasn't that gory, which is kind of true. These deaths could have been a little more brutal, especially if this was supposed to be on the slasher idea, but this film was a lot more in-depth than just being a plain old slasher horror flick. And my reasoning for is also the fact of saying that you can take the drama aspect with this one as well. And the kill count for this one is 10 people. So 10 people throughout this film end up dead, and more dead. The tagline for this film was "Get ready for a killer night out." And I appreciate in this film that it directly states exactly what this film is supposed to be about. And there's two different instances that I want to bring up that kind of directly tells you exactly what the intentions of this film is. So the first quote that I'm going to bring up happens at the beginning of the film, and it's just shortly after Kaya's death. That is the opening scene. You get that first death, which is the typical of a slasher film, that you get that initial first kill, and it kind of sets the tone of how the film is supposed to be. But you get into the fact of another kind of like nice horror trope that's been kind of thrown out there throughout the years, is that you have the two of our main characters, which is Pierce and Jake, and they're sitting there watching a horror film. So you have a horror film being watched in a horror film. That's kind of become a good setting, a nice trope that kind of happens quite often lately. Jake is not enjoying the film. He's not a horror fan, but to appease his friend Pierce, they kind of make these compromises so that he does these Friday night horror movie films with his friend. And so while he's complaining about it and the stupidity of the horror genre in general, you have Pierce who gives the line, "Jake, it's horror. 70 years of genre tropes tell us that gore porn is not about logic. It's about the squirm factor." So right away, this film is setting the tone that it's not supposed to be a serious film, that this is a slasher film, this is a gore porn film, that we are just supposed to be watching people dying and we're supposed to be enjoying the film. We're also told the setting apart of this film is that it's a tragedy. For the reasoning for me thinking that is the fact that Shakespeare's Macbeth is quoted in this film, and it is a very important part because it even is one of the ending quotes for this film. So we're told throughout the film what to expect, what to look into, what to think of, and the fact that this is just supposed to be your typical slasher film. It's horror. It doesn't have to have any real in-depth anything to it, due to the fact that it's just for the squirm factor, and the fact that we're supposed to know that this is a tragedy because of the fact of Shakespeare's Macbeth, and talking about these strange sisters, that they're not close to each other. In fact, they haven't talked in 3 years. Neither one of them has known what each other has been through, but they've both been through two of the most traumatic, terrible things in their life, and neither one of them was there for each other. And especially the younger sister, Pierce, blames her sister Ivy for not being around when she was going through her trauma, but not realizing that Ivy was going through her own demons, and that she was actually going through rehab, and she was suffering from depression. She was trying to commit suicide. And so you have that story setting to where the tragedy is leading up to what is going to be the big reveal, and how is this tragedy going to go about with all these friends, and what ends up happening, and that they lose their sister, they lose a friend, and now they're being blackmailed, and do they seek justice? Or once they start realizing that people are being killed off one by one, who is the true killer through all of these traumatic and drastically brutal murders? Now, to start with the feelings of why was this film so unpopular, I kind of hinted at it for the fact that people felt that the kills could have been more brutal. One of the other aspects is the fact that a lot of these characters are very unlikable. Not type of characters that you want to be in depth with, that you feel for them, that kind of thing. It's not bad acting. It's definitely not that. All the actors, all the actresses did a phenomenal job on this film. They did a great job, but they're just unlikable characters. And when it comes to unlikable characters, it's really hard to root for somebody, especially for them to become the final girl or the final boy, and that they're the ones to be the winners in the end. It kind of, I guess, fits that these characters are unlikable because you don't really care when they die. Now, with that being said, that's more on the lines of other people's thoughts, and that also in my thoughts, these characters can be pretty bad, pretty toxic people. Especially, you're not supposed to really like and appreciate Hunter. He's kind of the ex to Pierce, but he's not really an ex. He was just supposed to be a hookup buddy, but he gets obsessive and he decides that it's going to be a great idea to sneak, well, he doesn't sneak in. I guess he uses a friend to his advantage to get tickets into this exclusive rave that's underground and everything, and takes his then girlfriend, Ray, that he's seeing, to go and try and reconnect with Pierce because he wants to be with her, not Ray. So you have that aspect. You're not supposed to like him. Ray's almost a likable character. You kind of feel bad for her because of the whole situation, but she's also a very unlikable character too. She's all about the views. She's very snidey to Pierce, but at the same time, I mean, I can't really fault her for that because her boyfriend, boy toy, is basically taking her to a club so that he can hook up with this other girl. I think I'd be pretty persnippety about the whole situation as well. But you also have Pierce's best friend, Jake, who he could have been one of those characters that you would have loved to have seen him become the final boy, but he's just so unlikable because he's such a whiny character. He whines about everything. He's negative about everything. And you slowly go into the factor to find out that Jake is in love with Pierce's character and this and that. But he's very opinionated, and him trying to be protective of her comes off as him basically slut-shaming her, and she misreads it as the wrong thing. But at the same time, everybody else who eggs at her as well and picks at her, she just takes everything to be negative, this and that. I think the two characters that I can technically like the most out of the entire film would have been Ivy and Brecken. When each death happens, you're kind of rooting for the killer. It kind of becomes one of those films, but that's how slasher films are supposed to be. In the long run, you don't want to care for the annoying teenagers or the bratty adults that are at this rave and that they're pretty toxic, whiny people. That you want to root for the slasher. The problem is when you're thinking that the slasher is possibly Dylan's character, and Dylan's not really a likable character either, but then they go into the mystery of the fact of, well, it can't be Dylan because when he's on set is also when somebody is dressed up just like him in his mask and his costume and is off killing people. So it can't possibly be him because he's on stage in front of people. So you have that aspect going on. I had also stated before that there's a lot of drama mixed in with this, and another aspect of why a lot of people did not care for this film, why it had a lot of low ratings, was they didn't like how much dialogue was in this film, and that they felt like there was a lot of wasted scenes just of people talking. But I get where the writer was trying to get with everything, that he's trying to build up using the dialogue to get you introduced to these characters so that you do care about them. But in the long run with the dialogue, it gets turned against you at the same time, where it's like you're almost bored of these characters, or in the aspect of where, like with Ivy and Brecken, you feel bad for them at the same time because of the trauma and everything they've gone through, and then having to deal with Pierce and the fact that she had killed herself in front of them. And you have Ivy who's angry and she wants to seek revenge, and the fact that she wants to get even with them and they want to have justice. So you get all this dialogue and storyline and a lot of talking, so this film becomes a slow burn. A lot of people didn't like it for the fact of how slow paced it was. It wasn't like go, 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 especially from the beginning when it was quick paced. So you have the initial killer right at the beginning, and then you move into the scene to where you're quickly introduced to your main characters and then taken to the club, and then it becomes a rave scene. So then it sets a tone for what you're expecting, and then it slows down. And then, but at the same time, I appreciate it for the fact that these friends and family members are kind of going through something shocking, something really traumatic, and the fact that they're trying to process it. And so it's also an interesting aspect that part of the mystery that ends up becoming the ending of who's the killer, this and that, you're kind of given little breadcrumbs throughout the film as well to kind of know who the killer really truly actually is. So it's a slow burn, which a lot of people don't like slow burns. This was one of those movies where I definitely needed to watch it a few times to catch some things, because there was a lot of mystery tied in with this one. And the fact that one of the things that was really important to this film actually kind of was just brushed over, and one of them was the fact that Pierce was huge in the occult, and that's kind of just brought up as a side story with Ivy's character when she's telling the story, but this is also when they bring up the Shakespearean Macbeth story. So you're getting two major clips for the movie. Was the fact that Pierce, huge on the occult, and she believes in that type of like real magic. And you also have this fact that it's setting up to let you know that this is a tragedy, and a tragedy with family members. If you have any interest in seeing the film, I mean, it's a hard, slow burn slasher film, and it spills itself out perfectly. It's about nothingness. It's about gore porn. It's not supposed to have a meaning. It's just interesting that the artistic tones that Johnston took in this film, because now we can go into my thoughts with the film. I personally like this movie. I don't love it. It's not going to be one of those where it's going to be on my top 10 most favorite horror movies of all time, but I do like this film. I appreciate it. I like the in-depth thoughts for it, and yes, it's a slow burn, but it's very artistic. It's very beautifully filmed, and one of the scenes that I can use for a perfect example was when Pierce was having her drug trip on her peyote spirit trip, and it just was so brilliantly lighted, and the settings was amazing, and it's just the dark tones while everything's going through, and I just thought it was artistically filmed. And so for me, the slow burn wasn't bad. Yes, characters are unlikable, but after me watching it a few times and actually being more associated with the characters, which yes, you shouldn't have to be that way with films. You should be able to like or dislike a character immediately or not. It's just these characters are more in depth than what they appear in a first watch. Obviously, the ones that you're gonna hate immediately. Cough cough Hunter, you're not supposed to like him or care about him, and so it's like the ex-boyfriend trope that you're kind of happy when dickhead dies, so that's all there is to that. And because of Johnston's background with that he helped with films and everything, he had a very artistic view for everything. It's just a lot of people wanted him to be way more in depth with the kills. They wanted him to be bloodier. They wanted it to be gorier. And I guess I can kind of understand that, but at the same time, his film had that whole underlying story with the artistic view and the tragedy. So if you're thinking of Shakespearean's Macbeth, or maybe even Romeo and Juliet, that this is also kind of a romance story. It's a very quick and very fast burning love story between Dylan and Pierce. And in fact, I have a little quote that was from Jacob Johnston himself, and it's, yes, there are slasher adjacent kill scene set pieces, but when you peel away the layers of these characters, whether you're on the chopping block or not, you will see Dreamcatcher is much more. Sometimes a satirical social commentary, sometimes a gripping dramatic love story, oftentimes a frightening thrill ride. The film, like the personality of the ensemble, evolves as the story unfolds. So he was even saying in himself that he had a storyline that was plotted with a slasher film. Do the two go together? It depends on who you are. Could this have been a better film? Yes, but we could say that about any film. And this could be one of those things that right now it's not popular. Right now it's not doing much. But let's face it, for the past couple of years we've been stuck in quarantine. People have been pretty judgmental, opinionated. Give it about 10, 20 years, maybe this will become a cult classic that people are going to look back on and think, oh, this had a lot of story to it, and the artistic film work with this was brilliant. And so I can't not like this film, and it saddens me to know how low the reviews were on this. A lot of the reviews were pretty negative, pretty bad. In fact, there was somebody who was like, this is complete garbage and this and that, and that the kills weren't brutal enough, and we could go on and on about it. Me personally, I can say I liked this film. I enjoyed the actors and actresses. Yes, they were unlikable characters, but in my opinion, I think they were supposed to be unlikable, because in any typical normal slasher film, you usually kind of tend to root for the killer, and that's what you're there for. You're there for the kills, and it is spelled out right away in the film that this is gore porn. It's not supposed to have a meaning, and you're just supposed to watch it and enjoy it. I recommend it to anybody who wants a storyline into it. It's not like the biggest in-depth plot line, and it's a slow burn. Be prepared for a slow burn. It's not going to be quick, fast-paced the whole entire time, but if you're into artistic horror movies, I would suggest it and recommend it. Now, I would go into it with low expectations, kind of like what I had, because me knowing the low reviews on it, not knowing anything about it, I wasn't expecting much, so I was pleasantly surprised by how much I did end up enjoying it and liking it, and the fact that I could watch it a few times, catch something that I may have missed from the first time I watched it, like kind of getting a little more with the occult, because you'll find out how important that aspect of it is in the film. I don't want to give away the actual ending. That is for you to watch the film and to decide yourself what you think of the film. This film also kind of does a small commentary on cancel culture, and the fact that Dylan's character even brings up, like, hey, the fact that you can make one little mistake, one little mess up, and you can completely lose your entire career and everything. So a lot of base like social media and that, which ends up big part of the storyline with the blackmail and everything, but you find out that Dylan has actually messed up before this, and that's where him keep doing this. So you find out from his assistant and his manager, and well, technically his assistant's his agent, that they are planning on getting rid of him as well. I did like the fact that they were using the idea of what was going on in today's world, that with social media, that just one little thing and anybody can take you down, destroy your entire career. You don't even have to have a court case anymore. It's not like the old days where it's like you're innocent until proven guilty. Now with social media, it's just you're done. Your entire career is just done. And a funny moment from the film that I just kind of want to throw in there was a scene where Brecken and Jake were at the release party, and when they were heading up the stairs, they unfortunately end up almost colliding into a drunken woman who is very klutzy, and she decides to spill half of her wine on Brecken and decides that she wants to get mad at him when it's not even his fault in the first place, and tries to force him to replace her drink. So he takes the last remaining half of the wine in her glass and dumps it on her and her expensive clothes. So I thought that was hilarious. So I want to thank you for joining me on this horror review of Dreamcatcher from 2021. And if you enjoy a slow pace, slow burn, but very artistic slasher movie that mixes in the idea of a romantic tragedy and tragedy that befalls in the family and this and that, I would recommend to go ahead and watch it. Let me know if you've seen this film, what you think about it. I know a lot of people do not like this film. In fact, a lot of people hate this film. I'm not one of those people, but I'm also a connoisseur of horror movies. I don't bash a horror movie, just it's rare. There's one horror movie out there that I cannot stand, and I've tried to give it how many chances, and that's The Open House, which was, I think it was a Netflix original, so I think you can only see it on Netflix, which we won't go into that film. Maybe someday if I talk about films I cannot stand, that is one of them. This one at least had that artistic tone. It had very good acting. I enjoyed the kills. I loved the rave scene, so I had a lot of fun with this film. I would thank you for joining me on another Luxxxy Charms, and thank you for joining me on a horror movie review and seeing my thoughts on something that was recent. So if you want to see it, please watch it, and please just enjoy it. Don't go too into depth with it. It doesn't have to be more than what it technically was even stated to be, that it's gore porn. It's a tragedy. So you can find me, Charsie Luxxx, on my Twitter for Charsie Luxxx with 3 X's on Luxxx, Luxxx, or you can find me on my Instagram for Charsie87. I have another YouTube channel that I do with my friend DC that's called Little Channel of Horrors. And I wanted to end this one with a little note that was another quote from this film. And this one was by Brecken when he had a scene where he was talking with Jake. This was just shortly after Pierce had passed away. And Jake was mentioning that he didn't realize the amount of pain that she had, that he never in a million years thought that she would do something like what she had done. And Brecken says, "No one has the power to measure someone's pain. It's one of the flaws of humanity." So on that note, my little Luxxes, I wish you all a good day, and please know that you are not alone in this world. So if you are ever on your own dark, depressive path, please always reach out. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Oh my fucking god! Didn't I fucking say this was gonna happen? Thanks a lot. At the end of the way, sorry.
You owe me a drink.
I owe you a drink. You fucking spilled the drink on me. Go to the bathroom, okay? Listen, I'm with that. Don't worry. I'll keep the door open and meet me here.